All right. So the Israelis are up in arms about this interview. So let's see what Jeffrey Sachs had to say that got them so upset.
What happened was the U.S. got bogged down in Iraq. There was the insurgency. We didn't move onward to the next war, which was to be Syria, which was to happen already 20 years ago. But in 2011, what really brought Assad down last week started under Obama. And yes, and this is also interesting. It doesn't really matter who's president. This is long-term deep state policy. Obama ordered the CIA to overthrow Assad. So that started in 2011.
But why would Obama want to overthrow Assad?
Because Israel has run American foreign policy in the Middle East for 30 years. That's how it works. We have an Israel lobby. We have this clean break strategy. We have a plan for 7 wars in 5 years. And what's interesting is they actually kind of carry out this madness. They don't explain any of it to the American people. They don't tell anybody, but you can watch step by step. We've had 6 of those 7 wars.
Okay, so that's the clip that's really making the round. He show me the lie. And Jeffrey Sachs, the reason the establishment gets so upset about him is he was really one of their golden boys. You know, he really helped to shape the neoliberal idea with, I think, good intentions. A lot of his ideas turned out to be wrong, but he was very much, Naomi Klein attributes a lot of the shock doctrine thinking to him when the communist countries were first uh, falling and changing their economies. He was the consultant who came in with what they called shock treatment to change over their economies. A lot of people feel that didn't work. That's part of why Russia had such a difficult transition from a communist economy. Micro emphasis on microloans and improving the economic conditions as a way of reforming government rather than to reform government as a way to improve the economy, which again, a lot of people are saying he was wrong about. But hey, man, he was in the Bono Club. You had Bono writing the introduction to his books. So a lot of his insight comes from the fact that he worked a lot in Russia. He knows a lot of the players. He knows a lot of these people. He has a very long and distinguished career as an economist, as an advisor to the UN. He knows what is spoken of in the halls of power. And when a guy like this sits down, who has had access to these high councils for decades, and he sits down and tells you Israel runs our foreign policy, you have to take it seriously. And people calling him an anti-Semite. Sachs is Jewish, actually.
Yeah.
But we know that's never stopped them before.
It's never stopped them before. Not only is he's Jewish, but he was a fixture on mainstream media for the longest time until he started talking like this, which is why, like, the first time I ever heard him buck the narrative, and I forget what that occasion was or what exactly he said, but the first time I ever saw him do that, I'm like, wow, those words sound strange coming out of his mouth, because I'm used to seeing him on MSNBC and CNN and all these places, and now, just like they did to Matt Taibbi when he questioned Russiagate, they don't invite him back. You never see him anymore. When Sachs says 6 of 7 countries have fallen, he's referring to Sudan, Somalia, Libya, Syria, Iraq, and Afghanistan. Those are the 6 that have now fallen. Iran is the last one. And it's the hardest one, which is why it's the last one. Now, in the video that we played a couple weeks ago, there's the old footage from 2007 where Wesley Clark says the plan was to topple 7 countries in 5 years. That's just imperial arrogance. That's them thinking that, oh, we'll do this very quickly. Like, I actually do think Rumsfeld thought that the Iraq war would probably be wrapped in 6 weeks.
Those
6
Arabs,
days, 6
they don't
weeks.
know which end of the rifle is up.
Exactly. 6 days, 6 weeks, maybe 6 months. I do think he actually thought that, because I think they had plans to get all of this done within Bush's 2 terms. And that timeline is obviously extended, but the plan remains the same no matter who the president is, as he said. You know, this is now what you got. You got Bush, Obama, Trump, Biden, now Trump one more time. So 4 different presidents presiding over essentially a continuation of the same foreign policy, more or less. It has
Right.
sped up, it has slowed down. Now you're seeing it at an extremely accelerated pace in the lame duck session before Trump comes in, because I think there's a fear he might slow it down again. Just like he didn't get them the Ukraine war as quickly as they wanted. But now what we're seeing is, notice Russia's not on that list for regime change. Syria is. And so when Syria fell, it became this real sort of light bulb moment for many of us who thought, maybe that was a big payoff of the Ukraine war all along. It wasn't even about Ukraine. It wasn't about Russia. It was about Syria. It was about exhausting Russia. It was about distracting Russia so they could topple Syria, because that's the second to last one on the list. And now there's only one left.
Well, according to Sachs, in another part of that interview, he says Russia still has its bases there. And that Russia, in his assessment, strategically, because of what's going on in Ukraine, felt it's not worth redirecting troops there right now, but they're not done there.
Right.
They have not. They just moved back to their bases as this happened, and maybe planning to engage later. He also, this is what got the Israelis really upset. He lays out what greater Israel is in this, and for anyone who's not familiar, it's really the from the river. It's the real from the river to the sea.
Right.
It's their vision of what the boundaries of Israel should be, and it would take in the Golan Heights, it would take in Gaza, it would take in part of what's currently Egypt, it would take in Lebanon, literally from the river to the sea. And he says that what U.S. foreign policy has been defined by over the last 30 years has been Netanyahu's Greater Israel plan. And that knocking out this 7 countries is really about taking out countries that support Palestine. Because Netanyahu, from the beginning, never planned on allowing a Palestinian state, which meant you have to take out every country that's going to support a Palestinian state directly. So one person who found the interview really interesting was Elon Musk, with his typical Rorschach-esque response to tweets. Very interesting interview. I honestly hope he thinks so. I hope that maybe he'll burn his Netanyahu knee pads now and say something about the fact that the United States is Israel's bitch. You want to really put America first. You know what I'd find very interesting? Elon or Vivek saying a word about the Israel portion of this interview.
Right.
That would be very interesting to me. We shall see. I'm not holding my breath.
Nor am I.
And here is the Israeli Minister of Diaspora Affairs reacting to this. Congratulations to Tucker Carlson for becoming the leading platform for fringe Holocaust deniers, conspiracy theorists, and blood libel enthusiasts who oppose the state of Israel. Well, I didn't hear any of that in this interview. I heard a guy who has had very inside access to the halls of power for at least 30 years calling out the influence that Israel has on our foreign policy. And if you have an alternative explanation for why we continue to fund this genocidal settler colonial state against the will of the American people, I'd like to hear what it is. And here's somebody calling this out, and this is where you're going to see the rifts in the MAGA coalition. But your boss's favorite tech bro is pushing it. That's off script. It's off script for Elon to be promoting this interview. Here's some other reactions, which are kind of interesting. Clearly, you didn't watch the entire interview with Jeffrey Sachs. He was 90% correct. You might not like what he said, but he's not wrong. Now, this is pretty interesting. This is from somebody with an Israel flag.
Yeah, with the Israel
in
flag
their profile
emoji. Yeah.
Another comment: seeing all you nuts lose your mind over this is itself a massive win. Not to mention the spreading of valuable truth and Sachs's critical message of working together with other nations for peace, something the state of Israel and its neighbors never understand. Hear, hear. But here's a different take, probably more typical of Zionists. True, there is much work to be done in Hasbara. For anyone who doesn't know, that's their term for
Explaining,
propaganda.
Yeah.
Explaining, yes, but it's propaganda.
Explain. Yeah.
Israel's very existence might not have been realized without the PR efforts of the 1940s, which proved that anti-Semitism and disinformation can be effectively countered. That's probably more typical of people who follow this account. But yes, that I would highly recommend that interview. He covered a lot of ground. It was really fascinating. They're getting some where the libs are attacking it is they discuss Syria at one point. Sachs describes it as having been a functioning country in 2011, so people are coming at him. He had already killed thousands of his citizens by then. Now, I'm not expert enough in Syria to litigate that. What I can say about American foreign policy is if we gave a shit about that, he'd be the first who did something like that we gave a shit about.
Yeah,
we're perfectly happy to be allied to
to
Saudi Arabia
Yeah.
that committed a genocide in Yemen. But this was an unfriendly dictator. So all of a sudden we've got an issue. And they didn't, Tucker said at one point, I never understood why I'm supposed to hate this guy. He mentions that he protected Christians in the country. But overall, his take was more the isolationist, like, I never understood why we're supposed to care about toppling this government, which I think most Americans would agree with.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's not our society, it's not our country, and for you to still be parroting these lines about the atrocities of the Assad government, like I said, I'm not an expert. I'm not in a position to confirm or deny those accusations. I don't know the specifics of them. I'm sure some are true and some are not. That's usually the case. But in terms of like our interventions, I'm sorry, the verdict is in on this. Iraq, worse for our involvement. Libya, much worse for our involvement. Afghanistan, worse for our involvement. Like that's not an argument at this point. Like to make that, to still be making that argument is to have no knowledge whatsoever of pretty recent history. And they don't have knowledge of that. And what knowledge they have, they've just had deprogrammed out of their minds. That's why the libs sound the way they do. Because even when they learn something, they'll forget it as soon as they're told to.
Yes, it is. Yesterday we were at war with Eurasia.
Right.
Today we are allies with Eurasia.
Please clap.